MK Ultra, lots of information out there about it. Apparently come to an end in 1973. Well, we'd certainly question that fact, and I think we've got plenty to suggest from the Q posts that it is still extremely active. More importantly, his own personal experience can tell you without a doubt that some form of MK Ultra is still in existence and is still operational today. So this post tells us that Project Deep Dream is involved in some way, shape or form. It certainly relates to the MK Ultra stuff from our understanding of it and our experiences of it, and it would also appear that Edward Snowden was involved in helping Jack in relation to what went down on the 15th of February. Clearly there's more far-reaching implications for other individuals, including your mainstream media, and there's a warning that's basically telling them to fear the storm because they're aware of the game that's being played and that they won't be getting a free pass. Considering speculation recently that Jack's disappeared, this post would seem to be of some importance in relation to why he's disappeared. It looks like the message is starting to spread a little bit further, a little bit wider, and as such Jack's either gone on the run or he's been taken out. This post relates to questions that are being posed to Jack. It's not about Jack as such, it's speaking to him. So obviously it would appear that Jack was aware that there's going to be a civilian puppet created. It then asks him whether that civilian puppet's actually a player in the game. Q goes on to point out that he plays for keeps, asks Jack if he needs help sleeping, and asked him how his meeting was with Pelosi. He was aware of the fact that protection was offered to Jack with his meeting with Pelosi, and tells him that he should have had a life lesson, or at least this is the life lesson: be smarter than those that are controlling you. In relation to the T-minus 1234, I couldn't tell you exactly what that relates to. If we turn his attention now to this post, February 15th, which is where it all begun, this one you are told to read very carefully. It's talking about being unreleased, highest classification of information, and it's referring to the ability to use frequencies, incoming signals to modify code and program X over an X period of time, and it designates a mobile phone to control the target subject. Talks about an operation that's conducted and the origins outside of the United States, and it also talks to us about car control. Now, this is nothing at all to do with car control. This is about controlling the person who's driving the car or the individual. And the reason that we know that, if we look at the MK Ultra research that was provided to us and declassified, many moons back, there was plenty about the psychic driving that was being studied. This is obviously not about controlling a car. The car has a separate meaning, which we can cover at a later point. It's also talking about the statement by the driver, and I believe the driver referred to it as being in a fairy tale. So again, that's showing you exactly that this is not about the car, this is about the individual that was driving the car. As the World Turn is a marker that connects into many different places, and this is bigger than anyone can imagine for obvious reasons. Now, there is, again, as I said, a lot more that links back into this. This is the trigger of a lot of additional stuff that comes further on down the line, and that's where the fact that this is bigger than anyone can imagine probably comes into play more. We then get a level of verification, really, from this post, again, dated 15th of February. We have an anon that states that he's throwing a little more information out there, obviously referring to the mobile phone signals, and speaks a little about them. But the intriguing bit is probably in the second paragraph, where he speaks about this inherently means that phones of today are going to be square wave signals and very low power. If that alone was enough, then Q wouldn't exist. They would simply shut them and us down. So what that is essentially telling you is that the mobile phone signal is used as a trigger in some way, shape or form. So there's another element to the MK Ultra. It's not just the mobile phone. Now, we've had a big link to music. So whether that's the link there is difficult to say. It could be something that's more subliminal. I'm not 100% sure. But he also goes on to state that obviously it's not enough to completely program a human. So there's an element of programming, or at least an element of triggering some programming that's done by a mobile phone signal. He then talks about the Parkland shooting and states obviously that he believes that there's some kind of predisposed, or rather you're predisposed to move in that direction in relation to, I suppose, becoming a shooting, etc., etc. Now, our experience would suggest that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. From our experience, they will be able to put pretty much anything that they want in your minds. They can certainly make you believe that you're hearing voices, you're being spoken to. They could call it God, and there's some research that's probably worth looking into about the voice of God. We honestly couldn't say if that's the case. Certainly I'm not predisposed to go out and shoot anybody. Maybe that's the reason that we were chosen to kind of go down this rabbit hole for you. I'm not entirely sure. But he also states that you can't just flip a switch on a born pacifist and they suddenly become Rambo. That would make sense to me. The one thing that I do find intriguing is that a lot of these guys, as you've probably seen from other Cube posts, that have referred to them receiving therapy in some way, shape or form, and that was certainly something that was attempted with myself, and again we can cover that a little bit later. And there's also the fact that I lost my father at quite a young age, and a lot of these people that have been in these scenarios, the active shooter scenarios, etc., appear to have gone through some form of childhood trauma, I suppose, a psychological trauma at a young age, whether that be losing a parent or something, a little bit more serious than that. It certainly appears to be that's involved in some way, shape or form. Now, when Q responds, he talks about 3 scientists that were actually researching satellite relay of a mobile phone signal to an end user, which would suggest that possibly a satellite is involved in some way, shape or form. And if you look at the cards, the Illuminati New World Order cards that seem to be linking in with everything that Q's been posting about, then they would suggest that there's some form of satellite use that does occur. And he also asks, these guys were killed. That's the top and bottom of it. And why would they be killed? And obviously, the research was seen as classified, so therefore, classified research talking about satellite relay to mobile phones, and the 3 scientists that were researching it wind up dead, would suggest to me that that is exactly what the case is, and that's exactly what we're looking at. So here we have the Orbital Mind Control Laser Illuminati New World Order card. You'll notice the Smith written in the bottom right hand corner. Now Orbital would suggest obviously satellite, and that would tie in with the research that the scientists were doing with satellite relay of mobile phone signals. We then move on to the question of how do you know the future, and the response that we receive is control. Well, again, car control, obviously, as we said, is nothing to do with the car. It's about controlling the person. And if you've seen any of our posts where we clearly predicted the future, you'll understand what this post is specifically about. We'll draw to a close with this post. Notably, 15th of February yet again, we were told to watch the water. What we then saw was a United States F-15 fly off the coast of Britain, where he would have certainly shouted "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday," before flying a absolutely huge air queue above the water. So there's a couple of double meanings that tie in with this. There's definitely a link to make with F-15 and February the 15th. That again we'll cover in more detail in the next video. But the important thing, I think, more than anything to derive from this image at this present moment in time is the fact that we've got a huge air queue, and that occurred on February the 15th, or F-15, with or by an F-15.